Why am I here? I ran into her at a supermarket I stopped by on a whim. Thinking back to the past, I found myself calling out to her before I knew it. My name is Ryan, 29 years old. I work in sales at a leading company. Jessica makes us feel relaxed, doesn't she? In recent years, Jessica, the receptionist at our office, has become the talk of the town. Famous for her beauty since she joined the company, she's known for her cheerful and bright personality, light makeup, and modest attire. She's popular not just within the company, but also with our clients. However, I never felt attracted to her, even though she's 5 years younger than me. We work at the same company, but the only interaction we have is when entering or leaving the office. Just a beautiful receptionist I exchange greetings with. I never thought our paths would cross beyond that. Hey, aren't you Ryan from the sales department? After work, I went to my favorite bar and there she was, Jessica, sitting at the counter, drinking alone. Good to see you. Surprised she remembered my name, I just greeted her and went to sit in the back. Ryan, if you're alone, how about joining me? However, I ended up drinking with her, called over by her friendly smile. I live with my family, but everyone is a lightweight when it comes to drinking. I got tired of drinking alone at home, so I've been exploring new places. This bar is really great. Jessica was drinking barley shot shoe. The owner, who came to greet me as a regular, mentioned that Jessica seems to be a good drinker. This place has a great owner. I recommend it if you're thinking of becoming a regular. As we both drank, the conversation flowed. I realized that Jessica didn't know she was referred to as the office Madonna or beautiful receptionist. When I casually mentioned the rumors about her, she just laughed them off, saying, "I'm not interested." Another round, Jessica said, passing her glass to the owner with enthusiasm. Watching her engage in lively conversation with the surprised owner, I began to see her in a new light. Eventually, we started running into each other at the bar after work, and soon we began drinking together more often. She laughs heartily and genuinely, without any pretense. I found myself increasingly drawn to Jessica, who deeply cherishes her family. We started going out on our days official. I couldn't ignore my feelings for her anymore. I had genuinely fallen for Jessica. I'm not very experienced in love. So, with a do-or-die attitude, I confessed my feelings on Christmas. I thought she would reject me, seeing me as just a drinking buddy. But her response was unexpected. "I like you too, Ryan." Jessica, blushing and looking down, responded in a soft voice. I was so happy, I couldn't help but shout for joy, which was unlike me. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and the happy days flew by. A year later, on Christmas, I proposed. Of course, Jessica said yes, and we became husband and wife. My colleagues envied me for marrying the office favorite. I was proud of my wonderful wife, but living together gradually led to struggles over differing values. "Sorry, I couldn't cook well today. I'll go buy some lunchboxes. Just wait a bit." Jessica, who usually got home before me, was eager to cook. But every other day, she'd fail and end up rushing out to buy lunchboxes. "Shall I cook dinner? If you push yourself too hard from the start, you might collapse." "It's okay. I want to become a good wife by increasing the household chores I can handle quickly." Living together, I realized that Jessica was really bad at housework. During our dating period, I brought up the idea of living together several times, but Jessica said, "I want to live with my family until we get married." I respected her wish and decided we would live together after marriage, looking forward to it as a post-wedding joy. So, I hadn't realized her struggle with housework until now. The era where women do all the housework is over, and since we both work, I suggested sharing the chores right after moving in. Jessica honestly admitted, "I'm sorry, it's embarrassing." But I've never done housework before. I'm a complete beginner, so I might cause some trouble. She seemed to feel guilty about having no experience in housework, but I thought there was no need to feel so complex about it, as everyone starts as a beginner. Probably in Jessica's family home, her mother-in-law did all the housework. That's what I felt when I visited a few times. Jessica and her sister were pampered to the extreme. Though they were raised with care, it likely resulted in 25 years detached from household chores. Don't worry, we can learn together. To that, Jessica smiled softly and said, I was ready to be disliked for saying this, so I'm really relieved. From then on, Jessica put in a lot of effort. Eager to do the housework herself, she researched and experimented with tips from the internet. At first, I found her efforts endearing and watched over her, but she turned out to be surprisingly unskilled. I did the shopping on my way home. When I got home, she would happily show me what she bought, but I had to tell her, thanks, Jessica. However, we already have onions and carrots from yesterday, so you didn't need to buy them today. Really? Oops, sorry. She seemed to have no habit of checking the fridge, often buying the same ingredients multiple times. She also seemed unaware of prices until at the checkout, often buying expensive seasonings and household items. Ryan, what should I do? I did the laundry but forgot the fabric softener. It took her a long time to get used to laundry. Even though I suggested that we should do laundry regularly to avoid piling it up, Jessica often forgot to do it. As a result, we ended up with a large amount of laundry to deal with, and both hanging and collecting it became a struggle every time. I was used to household chores since my university days and was quite good at them. While I supported Jessica's efforts, the chores took so much time that I ended up doing more myself. Gradually, Jessica distanced herself from housework. It's faster and more accurate when Ryan does it. Maybe this is for the best. Jessica must have felt frustrated, unable to perform the chores to her satisfaction. Her once bright and hearty laughter seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a tired expression. I used to think it was okay not to force myself to do things I'm not good at, and that it's fine to try hard again when I felt like it. However, one day, I started to accumulate dissatisfaction. However, things started to change after our son, Max, was born. Welcome home. Thanks, I'll make dinner right away. Life became even busier with childcare. Our child's every cry was adorable to me. I felt I could do anything for him. I truly felt that way from the bottom of my heart. Jessica had severe morning sickness during pregnancy, making it difficult to work, so she took an early maternity leave. I took over the night care of Max, wanting her to rest. During the day, our parents helped, but it was still a struggle with first-time parenting. After childbirth, her body was already worn out and her energy depleted. That's why I believe mutual support between spouses is essential. After the challenging first 3 months, my exhaustion reached its peak. Work got busier, and I came home late every night after long hours and overtime. I had no time to rest, immediately starting household chores upon returning. Jessica took care of Max during the day. I kept telling myself that, trying to manage everything alone. That was my mistake. I was unknowingly strangling myself with my own efforts. Welcome back, Ryan. Today, Max. Sorry, I need to rush and get the laundry in. Oh, sorry, I'll take care of it. Jessica, unchanged since our marriage, always greeted me happily upon my return. But as soon as I entered the room, the messy scene stressed me out. Laundry hung outside on the balcony, and unwashed dishes in the sink. Lately, I think I've been looking at everything with a cold eye. I stopped Jessica, who hurried to get the laundry, and silently started folding it myself. Seeing the awkwardness in Jessica, she went to attend to our crying son, Max. On one of those days, I couldn't hold back my frustration anymore. "Jessica, can't you do something when Max is asleep? I take care of him at night, so you can sleep, right?" I vented my frustration, sighing at the perpetually messy room. Jessica listened with an apologetic look. Irritated even by that, I spoke coldly. "Yay, I know, I'm really sorry." Her sad face pained my heart, but her apology somehow made me speak more harshly. "Max has started weaning, but the rice porridge you make, Jessica, the grains are too big, I'm worried he might choke. And you're giving him foods and methods that are too early for his age. Please study before making them." Max was now 5 months old, and we had started his weaning. Jessica, not wanting to rely on store-bought food, began cooking. I was initially pleased with this change, but her lack of study and cooking skills showed, making me oversensitive about anything Max ate. "I'm sorry, I can't even make porridge right. You're amazing, Ryan, doing both work and house chores. Thank you, even though you're tired." Why does she thank me when I'm criticizing her? Why does she respond with kind words when I'm unloading my frustrations on her? I hated myself for becoming such a negative person. Time passed, and Max grew to be 4 years old. That year, Jessica and I divorced. It started with something trivial. During my business trip, Jessica was to take care of Max and the house. She was enthusiastic about doing house chores again, but when I returned, I knew everything from seeing my mother-in-law, who greeted me. "Ryan, you're back early. Welcome home." Jessica, clearly flustered. Seeing my surprised face, she honestly told me she had asked her mother for help. But I blamed her. "Why did you ask for help? Now, I think, what's wrong with asking your own parents for help?" I had lost my patience due to various stresses and took it out on Jessica. How low could I be? "Jessica, didn't you change your full-time receptionist job to part-time to focus on housework? So why am I still doing all the housework?" My mother-in-law had left immediately after I got home, so she was no longer there. With Max at daycare, it was just Jessica and me, a tense atmosphere hanging between us. Jessica didn't argue back as I showered her with harsh words. "I want to relax a bit when I get home from work, but I can't. I have to do house chores right away." Jessica just nodded, her face down. After 5 years of accumulated stress, I finally brought up divorce. Jessica looked sad and resigned, quietly agreeing to the divorce. I still had feelings for her. Her kindness, brightness, and sincerity. My feelings hadn't changed since we met. I didn't want to divorce, really. But I felt that staying together would break something beyond repair. The more emotional I got, the more hurt Jessica became. I had focused too much on her inability to do housework. I had seen her trying hard up close. I realized she felt sorry for not being able to do certain things. It wasn't Jessica's fault. I knew this better than anyone, yet somehow we had drifted apart. "Please take care of Max." I agreed to take Max, with the condition that Jessica could see him whenever she wanted. Jessica had nowhere else to go, so she returned to her family home, and I, coincidentally, got a transfer to a branch office and decided to move. I worried about changing Max's environment at such a time, but since the transfer was within the same state, I decided to take him with me. "Ryan, how has Jessica been since she quit her job?" A few years after our divorce, I returned to my original workplace. I noticed Jessica's absence at the reception but didn't know she had quit. Apparently, it had been mentioned in the company newsletter, but I hadn't had time to read it amidst my busy days. I didn't know she quit. "Is everything okay?" Reacting to a colleague's intriguing comment, I learned that Jessica had resigned suddenly after becoming emaciated due to the mental shock of her mother's death. She probably didn't tell me about her mother's passing or her resignation to avoid worrying me. I remembered her close-knit family. They were genuinely close, always filled with smiles. Her mother-in-law was always at the center of it all. She had always treated me very well, and now I was worried about how Jessica was coping after losing her. I tried calling her, but the call never connected. We had only communicated via email about Max's visitation. Thinking she might check her email when she had time, I sent a longer than usual message, mentioning I heard about her resignation and asking if she was okay. Her reply came quicker than expected, just one word, yes. Worried, but remembering we were now strangers, I didn't continue the conversation. Then, on a Sunday, 1 week before Christmas, I took Max shopping for Christmas. Every year, we decorated and prepared lavish meals, just like when we were a family of 3. This year, I had forgotten to reserve a cake, so we were out looking for a bakery still accepting orders. Max, this bakery still accepts orders. Which Christmas cake would you like? Finding a miraculously available bakery, I asked him, but his unexpected reply took me by surprise. I want the cake I made with Mom and Dad together. It was from the Christmas when Max was 3. That year, having forgotten to reserve a cake, we decided to buy sponge, cream, fruit, and candies from the supermarket and decorate it ourselves. Though inferior in taste and appearance to store-bought cakes, the joyously decorated cake became a delicious and memorable experience. All right, let's make a cake this year. Really? Yay. Max jumped with joy at my words. In my memory, Jessica happily decorated the cake. It felt a bit lonely to make it without her this year. Mom likes this cake. Max pointed at a fruit tart in the display, Jessica's favorite. Shall we buy it and take it home? Now, compared to those times, my work has settled down, and I have more peace of mind. I regret everything: the divorce, the harsh words I said, my selfish behavior, and the cold attitude I had adopted. It's too late for anything now. Then came Christmas. I left work early to find strawberries for the cake. Typical of the Christmas season, many places were sold out. Finally, at the 4th store with strawberries, I felt relieved, and then my heart skipped a beat when I saw a woman arranging items in the deli section. Jessica, the woman in the mask and apron, was undoubtedly Jessica, and I instinctively rushed over to speak to her. Jessica, what are you doing here? Ryan. Jessica looked at me, surprised. Max was now in elementary school, and Jessica and I had no reason to meet anymore. Seeing Jessica for the first time in a while, now thin and worn out, pained my heart. I wish I had paid more attention to her earlier. Jessica, what time do you finish work? Before I knew it, I was asking about her shifts in time, and after a few minutes of waiting outside the supermarket, she came out. You really waited for me. Jessica was even more surprised that I had waited. Of course, I'm going to make a Christmas cake with Max, and we have other preparations too. If you're okay with it, why don't you join us? I knew Max would be thrilled to see Jessica. He always talked about her happily after their visits. Above all, I wanted to invite her. I was worried about her, and I thought there must be a reason we met again on this Christmas, a day with special significance for us. Is it okay if I join? Jessica asked tentatively, but with a hint of happiness, and I nodded back with a smile. On the way home, bracing for an awkward silence, I asked her about her life after the divorce and following her mother's passing. After the divorce, I stayed with my parents for a bit. Jessica shared that she had initially returned to her parents' house after the divorce but then decided to live alone, hoping for a day when she could reunite with me and Max and gain life skills. But then her mother became ill and eventually passed away. Unable to rely on her married sister for help with her father, Jessica returned home to care for him and switched to her current job for its flexibility and proximity. She also talked about the challenges of balancing work and household responsibilities. I realized that it was no wonder you were upset back then. I'm sorry for putting you through so much. I should have found a better way to express myself, and I was too stubborn about doing everything myself. I'm sorry." Jessica never blamed me. I thought about how endlessly kind and strong she was. We exchanged apologies and felt a bit awkward, but we soon arrived home. "Mom, you're here too." Max, who had just returned from school, was delighted to see Jessica and eagerly led her inside. I followed them into the kitchen, placing the strawberries I had bought on the counter. Jessica, unsure where to go, was invited by Max to join in the kitchen. As we started making the cake, it was like the old times of fun and lively atmosphere. Jessica, initially hesitant, joined Max in playfully decorating the cake in a whimsical way, and Max, inheriting Jessica's hearty laugh, enjoyed every moment. Seeing this familiar family scene, I felt a warmth in my heart. Jessica, too, seemed moved, her eyes moist as she bit her lip, laughing as she and Max bit the finishing touches on the cake. The completed cake was a creative masterpiece. The party was a blast, and the cake, despite its outrageous appearance, tasted like the best in the world. Max went to bed happy and content. As snow began to fall outside, and with Jessica saying her home was only 2 stations away, I almost insisted that she stay the night, and she agreed. We opened a bottle of champagne I had bought on sale and had a drink together for the first time in a long while. Jessica must have been going through a lot. Despite being 5 years younger than me, her skin and hair looked worn out. "Hey, Jessica, can't we start over? I know it's selfish, but I've been regretting. I hurt you, but my feelings for you haven't changed from the start." I abruptly brought up the idea of remarriage. Jessica, looking incredulous, responded in a quiet voice, "But I might just become a burden on you again." Even so, I expressed that now we could support each other better, apologized for not being mature enough back then, for not being supportive despite knowing her efforts, and asked her to remarry me. "Really? Of course, let's work on it together." Jessica nodded, tears in her eyes, at my words. And so, we decided to remarry. Half a year later, after much effort, Jessica's skill in housework had improved significantly. I also began to enjoy doing household chores with her, and now Jessica, eager to try complex recipes, even started attending cooking classes. Max was delighted that the family was back together, becoming brighter than before. I also realized that I lacked DIY skills, or rather, I was not good at making things. I noticed this during Max's summer vacation project, and surprisingly, Jessica was quite skilled in such areas. Now, we can proudly say we are a good couple who support each other in our weaknesses. Since I was young, I was groomed to take over my father's publishing company, which meant not only focusing on schoolwork but also reading a multitude of books to gain knowledge. Thanks to that, I was able to get into one of the most prestigious schools in the state, where I met Brandon. Since our attendance numbers were close and our seats were next to each other, it didn't take long for us to become friends. We would eat lunch together every day, bond over shared hobbies, have sleepovers, and study together. I never doubted that we would always be friends. But our friendship suddenly came to an end. I like Emily. One summer day, as usual, while hanging out at my house, Brandon confessed. Emily was a girl in our class. I was quite shocked, as he had never shown any signs of liking her before. I had no idea. That was all I could manage to say. The shock was partly because of how sudden it was, but there was another reason. The truth is, I also liked Emily. "Can you support me?" Brandon asked, his hands trembling. Although I wanted to support my best friend, I couldn't. "Sorry, but I can't do that." Upon hearing my response, Brandon looked utterly devastated. He probably didn't understand why I had refused. but I couldn't bring myself to nod in agreement. "Sorry, I like Emily too," I managed to say it, barely, but Brandon was speechless. He must not have expected that. "So that's it. Then we can't be friends anymore." His words shocked me. "There's no need to say something like that." I tried to talk it out, but Brandon wouldn't listen anymore. "I never really liked being friends with you. I just put up with you because our seats were close. Did you really think I'd want to be friends with a loser like you?" With those harsh words, he walked away. I never imagined our friendship would end so easily. I thought he was my best friend, but maybe it was only me who thought that. The shock was so great that I buried myself in my studies to distract myself from the pain. I spent my days relentlessly focusing on my textbooks. Since then, Brandon seems to harbor a one-sided grudge against me. I tried talking to him several times, but he ignored me, leaving me clueless about how to resolve things. Maybe I should have said, "I'll support you," back then. I've often regretted not hiding my feelings and supporting him. Could we still be friends if I had done that? But gradually, I started to get angry. It was wrong of me not to offer support, but what if I had confessed my feelings for Emily first? Would he have said the same thing? Why do I have to be hated this much? The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became, which only fueled my studies more. Thanks to that, I scored well on tests. However, Brandon began to study harder as if competing with me, and we ended up choosing all the same elective subjects. It couldn't have been just a coincidence. It felt like he was mocking me. Our teacher, Mr. Thompson, seemed to notice the change in us. He seemed to understand that Brandon was harboring unkind feelings towards me, and occasionally offered words of encouragement. "Brandon is just jealous of you, Ethan, so don't worry about it." With Mr. Thompson's encouragement, I was able to stop worrying about Brandon and focus more on my studies. I successfully got into a local national university. It might not be highly ranked nationally, but I chose it because I wanted to stay in my hometown. As for Brandon, he decided to attend a prestigious private university in New York. I was surprised, expecting him to follow me to the same university, but he seemed satisfied with his choice, and I felt a bit relieved that we would be apart. Unfortunately, neither of us ended up with Emily. My university life was problem-free and enjoyable. I thought I could forget about the unpleasant memories of high school, but an unexpected reunion dashed those hopes. After graduation, I joined my father's publishing company. It's a firm that primarily publishes magazines focused on local information. I had worked hard to take over my father's company. At the entrance ceremony, I was shocked to see a familiar face among the new employees. Incredibly, Brandon was there. At first, I thought it was someone who just looked like him, but it was definitely him. My father was pleased to have a highly educated and capable person join the company, but I had mixed feelings, remembering our high school days. Why would he join my father's company, knowing it was mine? There are so many other publishing houses. I can't help but wonder why Brandon, with his impressive educational background, would choose to work at such a small company. I couldn't help but feel there was some ulterior motive. It gave me a bad feeling. Still, we were colleagues, and I tried to interact normally with him. But Brandon's attitude was very cold, and he blatantly avoided me. Our coworkers started to wonder, "Weren't you two classmates? Why don't you talk much?" That's what I wanted to know. I have absolutely no idea why he would do that. The only reason I could think of was our high school fallout. It seemed petty to still hold a grudge at our age. Was he still that resentful? But ignoring someone like this is not acceptable in a professional setting, and we were colleagues whose work could be affected. I decided to keep treating him normally. I optimistically hoped his attitude would change, but even after 3 years, nothing did. When I was 27, my father, the president of the company, passed away suddenly. I took over the company, and at the same time, Brandon quit. I don't want to work under a low-educated boss. That was his parting shot. It seemed like his true colors. It felt like his mask had finally slipped. I had been looked down upon all along. I remembered he called me a lowly idiot on the day our relationship soured. Thinking back, he was cruel to classmates with lower grades, a heartless person who judged others by their academic credentials. Why hadn't I realized it before? I regretted even being friends with him for a short time. After leaving, Brandon started his own publishing company. His building looked eerily similar to ours, and the magazines they published were quite alike. It seemed like a deliberate taunt. Shockingly, I heard he was dating Emily, the girl who caused our rift. I pitied Emily if she was unaware of the kind of person he was. Then, due to Brandon's company, our sales plummeted, and half of our bookstores switched to his company. Why the sudden change? I pleaded with the bookstores, but they all responded with "We cannot answer that," and even our longtime partners turned cold. Given the timing, it's hard to think that Brandon's company isn't involved somehow. What could be the reason? What did Brandon do? I was distressed as the situation continued to worsen. Then, I heard something from an employee. It seems like Brandon has been spreading bad things about President Bennett. What, really? When I asked for more details, I learned he was saying things like I was incompetent, only running the company because of my father, and that the business would soon fail, and that it's better to sever ties with us. I may not be as skilled at work as my father, but I am doing my best, studying and striving in my own way. However, at this rate, it seemed unlikely that our former partners would return. I felt helpless and unable to refute these claims. The employees are behind you, President Bennett. We'll follow your lead, they said, but it was hard for me to bounce back from this. As I struggled through these days, an invitation to a high school reunion arrived. I didn't want to see Brandon. I hesitated, but I wanted to see everyone after so long. So, I took some time off work to attend. "Ethan, long time no see." I turned around to find Emily. Her smile hadn't changed since the days I had feelings for her in high school. "It's been a while. Have you been well?" Emily was still beautiful, and all my old feelings resurfaced. But she was supposed to be dating Brandon. I wondered if they were still together. Not wanting to stir up trouble, I kept the conversation brief and moved away. Brandon didn't come to the reunion, but it seems our classmates didn't have a good impression of him. They were all talking about how he bad-mouthed them and acted arrogantly. Then someone brought up Emily's relationship with Brandon. "Weren't you dating Brandon?" "Sorry, it sounds like gossip." "No, it's okay. It was only for about a month. I thought he was a nice guy at first, but he turned out to be arrogant. So I broke it off quickly," Emily replied. Hearing this was a relief. I didn't need to be overly cautious. "I'm single now. Haven't had a boyfriend for a while," Emily added. Her words sparked a bit of hope in me. Since we met again after so long, I decided to talk to Emily. We hit it off more than I expected, and we even exchanged contact information. Then, when Emily stepped away, another girl whispered to me, "Emily had a crush on you back in high school." Really? I couldn't believe Emily had feelings for me. Maybe it's worth giving this old flame another try. After that, Emily and I started communicating regularly, even calling each other about trivial things. Talking to her made me forget the stress of work. She also loved books, so we had many discussions about reading. "There's this book cafe I want to go to. Want to come with me?" she asked. The cafe she invited me to was one I had never visited before. It seems you can buy books you like inside the store. Being in the publishing business, I thought it would be interesting and educational. Sounds great. Let's go on my next day off. Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. I may be getting my hopes up too high, but I can't help feeling excited. And then the day off arrived, and we went to the cafe we had planned on visiting. There are so many books here. The place was an interesting mix of a bookstore and a cafe. All the books on display were classics, and it was enjoyable just to look at them. There was even a corner dedicated to Brandon's publishing company. A staff nearby explained, "This store is owned by President Abbott." Really? Hearing that made me feel sick. Emily seemed unaware as well. "Sorry, I didn't know. Should we leave? I'm okay with going somewhere else," Emily said considerately, and as I was wondering what to do, a familiar voice came from behind. "What are you doing? Such a dirty way of wiping." It was him, Brandon. He was berating his staff at the entrance. Then he came inside. "Look who it is, if it isn't the low-educated one and Emily. There's no need to talk to customers like that," I retorted, angered. Brandon just smirked and signaled the staff. "We have a special product for our low-educated guest." When Brandon instructed, the staff placed a book on the table. The cover was completely black, a crumpled and tattered paperback. "What is this?" Emily and I exchanged glances. "Shouldn't a second-hand book be enough for a low-educated customer?" Brandon said mockingly. Unable to bear it, I took Emily and left the store. I couldn't believe something like this had happened. "Sorry, Emily, for inviting you to a place like this. It's not your fault, Ethan. It's his," Emily said, tears in her eyes. We decided to walk away from the store and strolled through the city. As we passed a luxury hotel, a familiar voice called out to us. "Isn't that Ethan and Emily?" It was our former teacher, Mr. Thompson. He was coming out of the hotel, accompanied by a woman. "Thank you for the other day at the reunion," Mr. Thompson, older but still with his kind smile, said. "Thank you, it was fun. My wife and I were staying at the hotel for our wedding celebration. What a coincidence to run into you here. Oh, Emily, you seem to be crying. What happened?" Where to begin explaining? We were at a loss for words. "Just tell me, I have plenty of life experience and might be able to help." Encouraged by his smile, we decided to tell Mr. Thompson everything. After we told Mr. Thompson everything about our encounter with Brandon, he was quite shocked. "Actually, I lent money to Brandon when he was starting his company. He had debts from university and couldn't get a bank loan, so he came to me." Mr. Thompson looked troubled. "He hasn't changed since high school, looking down on others. I thought lending him the money would help him change, but it seems I was mistaken. He hasn't paid back a penny. He's a troublesome fellow. Let's go to his place now." Let's all go to Brandon's place," Mr. Thompson declared, and so we abruptly headed to Brandon's company. At the reception, we learned he wasn't in yet. "Call President Abbott immediately," but without an appointment. Mr. Thompson and the receptionist kept arguing. "I don't need an appointment for someone who won't repay a loan." Startled by the shouting, the receptionist hurriedly made a call, and soon Brandon rushed back to the office. 3 men accompanied him, but they didn't seem like his employees. "Mr. Thompson, what brings you here so suddenly?" "What do you mean? You're late with the repayment. I came to ask when you intend to pay back." Hearing this, Brandon paled. "Please stop. Not in front of my business associates." The 3 men looked shocked. They must be his business partners. "You were supposed to pay back monthly, but you haven't returned a cent. You haven't even repaid your student loans, right? The high school received letters about it. I'll pay back, I promise." In his panic, Emily delivered the final blow. "Brandon, at the book cafe, you were terrible. To us, your customers, you offered a torn used book, saying it's enough for a low-educated person. You're the worst." I know the real reason for your harassment. It's because I rejected you in high school. You knew I liked Ethan and got jealous. I don't want anything to do with a man like that. I still get emails from you every day, but don't bother me anymore. It's a nuisance." The three businessmen discussed among themselves. "If what we heard is true, it's hard to do business with you," one of them stated. "What? Wait, please. What about the nationwide expansion? We would like to reconsider, seeing your financial instability. You can't even repay your student loans. So how can you plan a nationwide expansion? That's not feasible. Please run a company that suits your capabilities." With those final words, the three men left. We left Brandon standing there, stunned, and went our way. After that, Brandon's company quickly went bankrupt. Rumors said he was overwhelmed with debt. He kept begging Mr. Thompson, but was firmly told to pay back what he already owed first, and after that, he became much quieter. As for me, I started dating Emily soon after, and, a few years later, we got married. Classmates and Mr. and Mrs. Thompson attended our wedding, and everyone congratulated us. Business is going well, and the partners who left because of Brandon have all come back. We're planning to expand our operations beyond the state. I want to continue publishing enjoyable books for everyone, not letting down my Father in heaven. "3 years ago, she, who bore a striking resemblance to my late wife, saw a photo of her and said, 'Bob, could your wife be? My name is Bob. I'm a 38-year-old employee at an IT company. I met my wife, Emily, 12 years ago, through a friend's introduction. Emily had lost her parents when she was young and was raised in a foster care facility. Perhaps because of the loneliness she experienced growing up without a family, she was very compassionate and kind to others. She was also affectionate and great at winning people over, and I quickly fell in love with her. One day, after a night out with friends, I managed to be alone with her under the guise of coincidence and gathered the courage to confess my feelings. 'Emily, I like you. Will you go out with me?' Blushing up to ears, she replied, 'I like you too, Bob.' From then on, we started dating, and 10 years ago, I proposed and we got married. Since then, life with Emily was like a dream. We both worked and shared household chores. Emily wasn't great at cooking, but her curry was incredibly delicious. Today we're having curry. Yum, it's fantastic. Can I have seconds? Aren't you eating too much? But it's so good. I cook sometimes too, and she would exaggeratedly praise how delicious it was. On weekends, we would clean the house together, go shopping, and then rent our favorite movies to watch. The last scene was amazing. Yeah, it really moved me. Emily and I shared a love for the same movies and got along well. Although we struggled to have children, we were a happy couple living contentedly. Our happiness was shattered on a swelteringly hot summer day 3 years ago. Emily, who worked in sales for an insurance company, was out on her rounds that day. While crossing at a green light, a drunk driver in a truck plowed into her at high speed, and she passed away. Devastated by the loss of my wife, I spent days crying and became so grief-stricken that I couldn't even go to work for a while. Why did Emily have to suffer such a terrible fate? How cruel can fate be? How painful it must have been to be hit by such a large truck. Poor thing. The more I thought about it, the more my grief and emptiness overflowed, unstoppable like a flood of tears. I drowned my sorrows in alcohol every night, weeping while looking at her photos and reminiscing. Eventually, I couldn't keep taking time off work. With no more paid leave and needing to support myself, I considered following in Emily's footsteps, but realized she wouldn't have wanted that. I had to keep living, to preserve the memories of Emily. I thought that perhaps keeping busy with work might distract me from the grief. And so, after returning to work, 3 years have swiftly passed by. 3 years have passed since then, working tirelessly to escape the sorrow of losing her. I handled a massive workload, earned a promotion, and became a relied-upon manager, finding fulfillment in my job. Then, one day, she joined the company. "I'm Kate, nice to meet you." She was the new contract employee in our department. "No way, it can't be." I stared at her face intently. Bob, is there something on my face?" "No, sorry, it's nothing." Her face, it was the spitting image of Emily's. Almost as if they were twins. But she must be in her early 20s. Emily would have turned 37 this year if she were still alive. It couldn't be a case of twins or sisters. Could it just be a striking resemblance to a stranger? "Kate, please use that empty seat over there. Maria, sitting next to you, will show you the ropes." I instructed her, trying to conceal my pounding heart with a calm demeanor. "Understood," she replied. Her voice even seemed similar, somehow. Is such a coincidence even possible? Or am I just so longing for my wife that I'm seeing illusions? That's what I began to think. But the more I saw her, the more Kate looked exactly like Emily. Her voice, the way she talked, even her cough, laugh, and the way she sneezed, it was hard to believe she was just a look-alike. Maybe she's a relative. That's it, I should ask Kate if she knows anything about my wife. One day, I called her to a meeting room, saying I had something important to discuss. "Bob, what did you want to talk about?" "Kate, there's something I'd like to ask you. Do you know this woman?" I showed her a photo of my wife on my phone. She widened her eyes in surprise. "This woman, she looks just like me." "Who is she?" "This is my wife. Unfortunately, she passed away in a traffic accident 3 years ago." "I'm so sorry for your loss," she responded. Then, looking up at me with difficulty, she asked, "Your wife, could her name possibly be Emily?" Hearing her mention Emily's name, my heart skipped a beat. "Yes, that's right, Emily. How do you know her name?" "Then her maiden name must be Abbott, right?" I gasped as she correctly guessed my wife's maiden name. "Kate, what exactly is your relationship with my wife?" When I asked, she uttered astonishing words. "I am Emily Abbott's daughter." "What, daughter?" Unbelievably, she was the child Emily had given birth to before we met. I was given up for adoption soon after birth and was later adopted by my current parents. I only learned about it when I became an adult and needed my family register for a passport for an overseas trip. That's when I first found out I was adopted. Her adoptive parents later told her about her origins when she confronted them. Emily, my wife, had become pregnant with her at the young age of 16. However, the older man she was dating at the time abandoned her upon learning of the pregnancy. Emily, who had lost her parents young and grew up in a facility, had no one to confide in and became increasingly isolated as her pregnancy advanced, until a staff member at the facility noticed. After giving birth, the baby was placed for adoption through a consultation agency with a couple who wanted children but couldn't have their own. And so Kate became the adopted daughter of her current parents. But Emily never mentioned having a child to me. Did she not mention it because she gave her up for adoption, making her no longer a child? Or maybe she thought I would be shocked to hear about it. Now, I'll never know what Emily was thinking by keeping it a secret. But learning that Emily had a child, after years of us being unable to have one, stirred a strange feeling inside me. Emily is no longer in this world. But her genes have indeed been passed on to the next generation. This thought almost moved me to tears. "So, you're Emily's daughter. I never imagined meeting you here. I'm glad you told me," I said, looking into Kate's face, the spitting image of my wife. She might not be my child, but she's the daughter of the woman I loved. I sincerely hope she lives happily. Bob, I have a favor to ask you. If you don't mind, could you tell me about your wife? Even though I knew I was adopted, I always thought my real parents were my current foster parents. So, I didn't care about the birth parents who abandoned me, but now, I want to know my roots. Oh, sure. It's natural to want to know what kind of person your birth mother was. I took her out to dinner that night, and we talked about the many memories I had with my wife. I told her about my wife's hobbies, such as movies and her favorite dishes, as well as details about her upbringing, the environment in which she grew up, the words she often spoke, the books she read, and so on. She listened with great interest. Actually, I like movies too, and I always watch 2 a week. She said, I like that movie too. What a coincidence. Curry is my favorite dish to make too. I guess we are similar in that way. Her eyes lit up when she realized the similarities between her mother and herself. Later that day, I was asked by her to show her around my wife's grave. She laid flowers in front of the grave and spoke to my wife. Thank you for giving birth to me, Mother. Thanks to you, I'm very happy and joyful now. My father and mother who raised me are very nice people, and I am glad that I met them. I am so glad that I was born. Hearing that, I burst into tears. I wonder if Emily is listening to this. Emily may have regretted having a child at the young age of only 16, but now that child is telling me that she is glad to have been born. I wish Emily could have at least met her while she was still alive. From now on, I want to support her because I couldn't do so initially. But right now, she and I are just boss and subordinate. I want to be a good boss for her at least. I hope I can be a support for her in my work as a boss. With this in mind, I became more enthusiastic about my work from the next day. It was then. Suddenly, a shocking scene caught my eye. Kate, can I have a word? Yes, Max, may I help you? Kate is called by Max, the department manager, and goes to the side of the desk. Max showed Kate the documents and, to my surprise, quickly patted her buttocks while giving her work instructions. She says, "What are you doing? Stop it, Max." When Kate resisted with a stifled voice, he said, "What are you talking about?" Max acted as if nothing had happened. I stood up hurriedly. "Max, I sigh too. Where are you touching?" "What? I didn't do anything." "You're not getting away with this. I'm going to report this to HR." "What? You dare to oppose me, your boss, in the name of your subordinate? I don't care what happens to you." Max was furious. I was prepared for the possibility that I might be told something or other and be fired. But when Kate and I went to consult with the personnel department together, Max was given a stern warning later that day. Furthermore, he was transferred to another department. Oh, thank goodness. Thank you so much for covering for me. I was in trouble because Max was persistent. According to Kate's story, Max had persistently invited her to dinner and even threatened to fire her if she refused. I'm so glad he got transferred. And by the way, you should have talked to me about it earlier. I'm sorry. I thought I might cause trouble to you. From now on, don't hesitate to consult me about anything. When I said that, Kate smiled happily. Thank you. At that moment, I thought, I want to protect this smile. Though I can't be her father, I want to do everything I can for her. After that, I recommended her for a full-time position, advocating to the senior management and HR. Thanks to that, Kate was successfully hired as a permanent employee of our company. This meant I could continue to watch over her closely. Relieved by this thought, I felt at ease. 2 years later, Kate got married to a male colleague she met at a company social gathering. Of course, as her boss, I attended the wedding. She looked stunningly beautiful in her bridal gown. The entertainment at the reception included a movie showing her childhood photos, which was deeply touching. When she came to my table during the candle service, I said, "Congratulations, be happy," and she tearfully replied, "Thank you, Bob. You're like a second father to me. Please keep watching over me." Of course, hearing those words, I struggled to hold back tears of joy. I wondered if Emily in heaven could see her. See her looking so happy in her bridal splendor. "Tom, please take good care of Kate." I lightly patted the groom, Tom, on the shoulder. "Of course, I will definitely make her happy." Tom, the groom, was a bright and energetic young man. He was competent at work and well regarded, so I felt at ease entrusting Kate to him. I also gave a speech as her boss. I talked about her hard-working and diligent nature, sharing various anecdotes, and took a photo with her. This photo would become a lifelong treasure. I even showed it to Emily's memorial altar. About a year later, Kate had a baby, and she sent me a photo of a tiny infant with a bright red face. Emily's grandchild. I felt as happy as if my own grandchild was born. "Emily, your daughter is now a wonderful mother." I spoke to the photo of my wife, as usual. "Let's keep watching over them, ensuring their family remains happy forever." Saying that, I felt as if my wife smiled gently back. On Saturday night, I headed to a pub located in the basement of a mixed-use building near the train station. The function room in the back of the pub was reserved for a gathering of familiar faces, dozens of whom had assembled. "Hey, Max, long time no see." My childhood friend, Bob, noticed me and called out. "Hey, Bob, it's been a while," I replied and took a seat next to Bob. Today was our middle school reunion. This was the first reunion for our class. We were all 23 years old. Those who went to college would be in their first year of work. But I had fallen ill right after starting high school and had to repeatedly go in and out of the hospital, forcing me to take a leave of absence. Eventually, I recovered from my illness but chose not to return to high school and instead started working part-time. This was because my father's business had accumulated a lot of debt and went bankrupt, so I decided to work to help out with the family finances. It was just my father and me. My mother wasn't around. My father worked hard, managing both the household and his job, and always supported me during my illness. He must have been very busy at his new job, working to pay off debts. I could tell how busy he was every time his constantly ringing cell phone went unanswered. Yet, he visited me in the hospital every day during my hospitalization. It must have been tough for him to make it to the hospital by 7 p.m. when visiting hours ended, especially since it took an hour by train from his new workplace. He always said, "I want to see your face at least once a day," and would show up in my hospital room. When I was discharged from the hospital and returned home, the house was always in disarray. Unfolded laundry piled up, dishes and cups accumulated and washed in the kitchen sink. And sometimes there were several unthrown garbage bags on the balcony. He must have been too busy to do the household chores, as he was working hard. In the midst of repaying debts, he also had to care for me in the house. I realized how hard it had been for him at that time. I wanted to be the one to support him. So once I recovered from my illness, I started working part-time at a bookstore. I worked diligently every day, never late or absent. And my efforts paid off. This year, I was promoted to a full-time employee. I shared this news with Bob, whom I met again after a long time. That must have been tough, missing a lot of school due to illness. Bob sympathized. Just then, a familiar woman approached us. "Max, I heard you didn't even finish high school. You're just a middle school graduate, aren't you?" It was Emma, who used to bully me in middle school. She was the last person I wanted to see again. It must be really tough for you if you don't have a high school degree. These days, you can't even get a decent job, can you? Emma said, looking down on me with disdain. I stayed silent and looked down, knowing it was pointless to argue with her. Middle school graduates don't earn much, do they? Come to think of it, you were poor even when you were in middle school, and you're still poor as an adult. I'm actually surprised to see you at this reunion. Can you even afford the fee? Emma said loudly, drawing the attention of everyone around us. Hey, Emma, that's enough. Bob interjected, but Emma glared at him and snapped. How dare you speak to me like that? Do you know who I am? Emma was the daughter of a local construction company owner. Her parents were influential in the community, with her father serving as the head of the neighborhood association, and she was notoriously arrogant in the local shopping district. Bob runs a coffee shop with his family in that local shopping district. It wouldn't be good for his family business if Emma started harassing him. I hurriedly stepped between the two of them. Bob, don't worry about me, I said. Bob fell silent, looking frustrated. Emma smirked and walked away. The reunion, which should have been fun, turned sour because of Emma. Bob consoled me, saying, "Don't worry about what she said. There was a time in middle school when I got the highest score in a Spanish test, and it seemed she couldn't stand it, being good at Spanish herself. I even have a Spanish tutor," she said, crying in frustration, a scene Bob had accidentally witnessed and recounted to me. That was when she started harassing me, but I never paid attention to it, thinking that karma would get her for such petty behavior. See you, Max. Keep it up. Take care, Bob. A few days later, I received my first paycheck as a full-time employee. I decided to repay my father for everything he'd done for me and took him to a famous and expensive French restaurant. It was a well-regarded place and had been featured prominently in the local paper when it opened. When my father saw the paper, he murmured, "That's a nice restaurant. I'd like to go there someday." Since I started working, he prepared lunch for me every morning, even though he himself had to get up early for work. My father, a man of few words and quite stubborn, was someone I deeply appreciated. Dining at such a high-end restaurant was the first time for both of us. My salary wasn't very high. Even though I lived at home, I had to split the monthly rent and living expenses with my father, so I didn't have much leeway financially. But living frugally every day, I thought it would be nice to splurge just once in a lifetime. So, I made a reservation at the restaurant. My father said, "It's a waste of money, no need for such things." But I want to enjoy some good food for a change. I insisted on us going there. On the day, both of us dressed up in suits and went out. The restaurant, with its luxurious exterior and interior, resembled an European castle, and we were both amazed. Of course, the food was delicious too. From the appetizers to the main courses, the dishes served had the flavors we had never tasted before. My usually quiet father, perhaps a bit tipsy from the wine, kept saying, "This is delicious," with a truly happy expression on his face. "I'm really happy that you've become a full-time employee and that you recovered completely from your illness," he said. His eyes began to shimmer with tears as he spoke. "I really regret not being able to send you to high school. I'm sorry for the hardships you had to face because of me," he said, looking straight into my eyes. It was the first time I heard such words from my father. I never knew he felt that way. "Dad, I never thought it was your fault. Besides, even though I didn't get to go to high school, I think it was a good thing that I started working at an early age and gained various experiences. And Dad, I'm grateful to you. It must have been hard to take care of me when I was sick, but thank you for raising me on your own." My father looked up when I said that. "Max, you've really grown up to be a fine young person," he said, with tears in his eyes. It was the first time I had ever seen my father cry. "Dad, don't cry. Come on, let's eat." We resumed our meal. My father, who normally didn't say much, was quite talkative that day. We shared nostalgic stories from my childhood and finished our meal in high spirits. Just as we were about to leave the restaurant, I heard a familiar voice. "Max, is that you, Max?" Hearing the voice, I had a bad feeling. It was Emma, who stood up from a nearby table and was approaching us. "I'm surprised to see a poor person like you with only a middle school education in such an expensive restaurant," Emma said, smirking at me. That bad premonition came true. I didn't care what she said to me, but I didn't want her to belittle me for only finishing a middle school in front of my father. I was worried he might blame himself again. Emma glanced at my suit and said, "What's with that cheap, tacky suit? Even if you dress formally, you still can hide your poverty. People like you don't belong in this kind of place." She was unusually critical and loud, perhaps in a bad mood. Worried, I looked at my father. That's when he stepped forward from behind me. "Emma, long time no see," he said. "What? Oh, you're Tom." Emma's eyes widened in surprise and she froze, mouth agape. "What, Dad? You know Emma?" "Yes, she's a sales representative for one of our company's suppliers," my father explained. I couldn't believe it. My father and Emma knew each other. Emma didn't even see who I was with as she was too busy confronting me. After his company went bankrupt, my father was fortunately offered a position at a friend's company and became the head of the purchasing department. To Emma, my father was an important client. "Tom, why are you here?" "Well, it's simple. This is my son. We came here for a father-son dinner. He treated me with his first paycheck," my father explained. "Wait, Abbott, you are father and son?" Emma was shocked. "I apologize for my rude behavior. I didn't know Max was your son," Emma said hastily. My father had a stern look on his face. "Emma, it seems you have quite a prejudice against academic backgrounds," he said. "No, that's not what I meant." Emma tried to make excuses, but my father interrupted. "I've known James, the sales manager of your department, for a long time. He never discriminated against you for being a high school graduate, and always treated you the same as other new employees who graduated from college," he continued. Hearing this, Emma's face twisted in frustration. "Yes, James did look after me, but the other college graduates and seniors looked down on me," she admitted. "Just because you were treated that way doesn't mean you should do the same to others. Such behavior is meaningless," my father responded. He spoke in a firm tone. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me, apologize to my son," he said. Then, Emma turned to me and looked straight into my eyes. "Max, I'm so sorry." She blushed as she apologized repeatedly. Seeing this, I felt a sense of relief. "Emma, the reason Max couldn't go to high school was that my business went bust at that time. He gave up further education so he could work and financially help me. He is such a considerate son, so please don't mock him ever again. And not just Max, it's wrong to mock anyone based on what's on the surface. Such behavior lowers your own dignity as well," my father said, placing his hand on Emma's shoulder. "Tom, I understand. I am truly sorry," Emma responded. "Dad," I was moved by my father's resolute demeanor. "I'll have a word with James about this," he added. "What? No, please, that would be embarrassing," Emma protested. "Or should I reconsider our business dealings with your company?" "No, please don't do that. Then I'll just have a quick chat with James." "Oh, no." Emma's shoulders slumped in defeat. "By the way, Emma, isn't your friend waiting for you to come back to the table?" Emma looked up as my father gently spoke to her. At her table sat a young man, looking our way with concern. Perhaps he was Emma's boyfriend. "You should go back to him," my father suggested. Yes, I will. Again, I'm really sorry about my behavior. Emma hurried back to her table. I thought to myself, the other day at the reunion and now at the restaurant, it was odd timing to encounter her. As we walked to the station, I said to my father, "Thanks, Dad." For what? For standing up to Emma. It felt good. I only did what was right. She's an adult. She can't go on like that, and I can't just stand by when my beloved son is spoken to in such a manner," he said with a gentle smile. Hearing him call me his beloved son warmed my heart. A few days later, my father took me to a department store and ordered a tailor-made suit for me. Despite his own financial struggles from repaying debts due to his business failure. "This is your present for becoming a full-time employee, and I just wanted to thank you for buying me a fancy meal the other day," he said, and paid for the suit. After all, he spent a lot more money than I did on the meal. I hope to repay him for the suit someday. And I intend to cherish our father-son bond and continue living harmoniously together.